With Jimmy G going to the Raiders, what sort of impact do you think he's going to bring to Vegas this upcoming year, and then subsequently years following after that?
So everybody knows, and if you don't already know, I'm a big Jimmy Garoppolo fan. I think Jimmy G is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not saying top 10. I'm not saying the best. I'm not saying anything of that nature. I think he is a well above average quarterback. I think he's a proven winner, and I think he gets it done. He's not flashy for 450 yards like a Patrick Mahomes. He's not someone that's going to go and dice up a defense accurately like a Matt Ryan back in Atlanta in terms of completion percentage. He's not someone that's mobile like a Lamar Jackson or a Justin Fields, but he is just a guy that finds a way to get it done, whether that's 125 yards and 3 touchdowns, whether that's 250 yards and 1 touchdown. It doesn't make a difference. He is the embodiment of what a franchise needs in order to freaking win, and that is what the Raiders need to do. The Raiders offensively have never been an issue. They struggled last year. Derek Carr got benched. They put in Stidham and all these different things. McDaniel's job is basically on the line with this signing. They have history from Jimmy's time and tenure in New England. They also went out and signed Jacoby Myers from New England, who also has familiarity with Josh McDaniels. You have a couple of different pieces to line up now offensively that are going to be talented. Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, arguably the best receiver in the game, Devontae Adams. The only questionable decision that Vegas made was trading Waller as they acquired Jimmy. It was just very awkward. As you sign a free agent quarterback of the future, you go and you trade arguably your best talented player outside of Devontae Adams. Maybe it's because he's consistently injured, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that conversation for that player in a second. What Jimmy G can do for you, again, isn't going to necessarily jump off the page, but maybe he can change the culture. Again, I've said it. Jimmy wins. That's period. No matter what. Whenever Jimmy was put into an NFL game, he found ways to win. There's a reason why San Fran traded for him a couple years back. There's a reason why the Niners went 7-0 when they got him. There's a reason why they went to a Super Bowl, NFC championships. They got it done. Did the defense help them? Absolutely. But when you have offensive talent like the Niners did, led by Jimmy Garoppolo, that is a big portion as to why the 49ers were so successful and have been over the course of the last couple of years. Last season's a perfect example. Trey Lance gets hurt right off the bat in week 2. Jimmy's got to come in. Everyone says he's washed, the whole nonsense in the offseason. And they go and they sparkle off a shit ton of wins until he gets hurt and Brock Purdy comes in. So that is the only issue / question mark is, can he stay healthy? And obviously we all don't know that. We can't look into the future. But for what Jimmy is worth right now and what they signed him for, especially with the market being as high as it is at $24.5 million a season or 24 and a quarter, I think that's pretty solid. He got $72 million up front, or 72.75. So basically just short of $73 million. And he got only 45 guaranteed of that. I know what you're saying. It's more than half. But I'm sure there's going to be incentives and all these different things. If you were to get injured, there's going to be repercussions and yada yada. The point is, if Jimmy can do what he did in in San Francisco, which is win, I think that will give them the opportunity, obviously, to go into the postseason. I'm not saying win a Super Bowl, compete for an AFC championship, because, again, they are in the most difficult division in the game. In the AFC West, I think Jimmy Garoppolo can help. Am I saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Derek Carr? Yes. Do I believe that the Raiders are going to have a better record than the Saints? No, not this year. The Raiders also have a lot of underlying issues on the defensive side. They've also had a statistically, in Derek Carr's 8-9 years in Vegas, they've been either 29th to 32nd in terms of overall ranked defense consistently. There are going to be a lot of issues that are going to be looming in Vegas. But I will stand on this hill here. Josh McDaniels' career rides on Jimmy Garoppolo's shoulders. If this flops, McDaniels will be out, and we're going to see what happens with Jimmy G there. But as a Jimmy G fan, I'm hoping nothing but the best for him. I think the Raiders are going to hopefully turn it around this year.
Kev, I was literally going to say the same thing about Josh McDaniels when it comes to this Jimmy G signing, because this, to me, this is a prove it type of move. It's you either live with this move or you die by this move. And for me personally, I don't have any problem with them moving on from Derek Carr for Jimmy G, because like you said, I think Jimmy G's track record speaks for itself. Wherever he's gone, he's been relatively successful. It's just unfortunately for him, it hasn't ended in a Super Bowl championship with him leading the way. They've gotten to a Super Bowl. They made it to Super Bowl 54 with him leading the way for the 49ers, but unfortunately they fell to the Chiefs in that game in Miami a few years back. But I will say, when it comes to Jimmy G, this upcoming tenure with the Raiders, it's not going to be easy because let's face it, the Raiders are in one of the most competitive divisions in all of football. They play in the AFC West. You're going up against teams like the Chiefs. The Chiefs just came off of a Super Bowl championship just a couple months back. You look at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are going to be hungry this upcoming year. I can guarantee you that based on how bad last year it worked out with Nathaniel Hackett at the head coaching spot. So with Sean Payton leading the way at the head coaching spot, I imagine Russell's trying to have a comeback year based off of how it went last year. I think the Broncos are going to give the Raiders a challenge. And then you look at the Chargers. The Chargers, they made it to the playoffs this past year, and then they had that epic collapse against Jacksonville in the wild card round. And I imagine that they're going to be chippy this upcoming year based on how last year ended for them. So when you look at the Raiders, the Raiders, they're rolling with Jimmy G. Obviously, they picked up Jacoby Myers from New England to add some depth to that wide receiver core. And like Kev said, when you look at their wide receiving core, it's pretty solid. You look at the top three guys, you got Devontae Adams, you got Hunter Renfrow, and now Jacoby Myers. It's not a bad room to work with. I think the Darren Waller trade, I think it's going to hurt them definitely offensively, just because when you look at Darren Waller, he's mostly known for his explosiveness in that tight end part of the offense. It would have been very interesting to see how they would have worked that out with Darren Waller being in that tight end room, because if you just look at it on paper, you put Darren Waller with that wide receiving core, Jimmy could put up some touchdowns with that core. The only thing is whether or not the offensive line would hold up to protect him. And that's going to be a key point of emphasis here for me, is whether or not the offensive line is going to be able to hold up to protect Jimmy G. Because when it comes to Jimmy G, unfortunately, one of the things that has just been relentless throughout his career is his injuries. And you look back to last year, he got plagued by injuries once again and pretty much missed the rest of the season once he went down about, I would say, a little bit more than halfway through the season. So obviously, when it comes to the Raiders, they are taking a little bit of a risk when it comes to Jimmy G, simply just because of injury history, especially recently. But wherever he's gone, as long as he's been given time to work with, he's largely succeeded. And he has a good running back behind him with Josh Jacobs in the fold. So I don't think this is all going to be on Jimmy G's shoulders. I think that Josh McDaniels, I think if he's smart, he's able to balance it effectively for the workload between Jimmy G passing the football and then Josh Jacobs running the football. I think offensively, I think they'll be okay. I think what this comes down to is what Kev alluded to. Is their defense capable enough to be able to get stops, to get the ball back to Jimmy G? If they can do that consistently enough, I think that they can make the playoffs this upcoming year. How far they get, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they can make a wild card round. I think best case scenario, they maybe make it to a divisional round. I think that's best case scenario for them at this point. But I think they were just dead set on moving on from Derek Carr. Maybe it's just a situation where Derek and Josh McDaniels weren't able to see eye to eye on how to lead this offense to new heights. And obviously, I think the familiarity between Josh McDaniels and Jimmy G, I think, was a big part in why both sides were able to come to an agreement for the foreseeable future. And we'll kind of see how this whole thing works out. But I think Jimmy G gives the Raiders a chance to be competitive in the AFC West. But to the point where they're going to win the AFC West outright, I don't see that. I think the Chiefs are better than them. I think you can make a case that the Chargers are better than them. And I think it's going to be a dogfight between them and the Broncos to figure out who's going to be third fiddle in the AFC West. But maybe there's a chance that the Raiders could hop into second fiddle behind the Chiefs in the AFC West if they play their cards right. Who knows? But like I said at the top, I think this comes down to Jimmy G's got to perform. And if he does not perform, I think Josh McDaniels will be out. I don't know if it'll be this year. It could be next year. But this decision essentially decides the fate of Josh McDaniels as the head coach for the Raiders. And time will tell whether he lives by that decision or dies by that decision. And I'll just leave it at that.